We're starting on the research and investigation of the project. First thing you're going to have to do is pick 3 different teams. The 3 teams need to be completely different. So do not write down team 1 football, team 2 hurling, team 3 rugby. We want different teams. So team 1 might be, for example, sport, team 2 might be, for example, trains, and team 3, for example, could be home economics equipment. Your reasons then, you need to give a reason as to why you want to explore these. So one reason might be that you have a big interest in the topic. So you might love playing football. That's one reason you might want to explore football. You might say that you don't know much about something. So in other words, you might think that trains might be an interesting topic, and you'd like to explore more and learn more about trains. So you basically write down a reason. So the idea here is that you write down 3 different themes, and then you're going to have a little think to see, right, which one would I have most interest in, and even more importantly, which one would I be able to find the most graphics and geometry in, do I think. If you write down, for example, football, you're going to be limited on how much stuff you can find. So you might really enjoy football, but you're not going to be able to do a good CBA based on football. So you need to give these 3 reasons a little bit of thought. Select a final theme. So give it some thought, and then write down here, nailed in stone, this is the theme I'm going to study. Now remember, keep it broad. Do not write down, for example, football equipment. You would write down sports equipment. Or do not write down cars. You might write down the automotive industry. So the wider cars, motorbikes, trains, buses, trucks would be an example. So there's 2 examples. So give a final assignment title. Then we have to come along and brainstorm prior knowledge. So the first thing we have to do is you need to figure out, well, what have I learned about graphics so far? So the idea is that you figure out, what do I know already? And from there you can figure out, well, what do I need to go and learn? So to do that, you end up with something like this. So you start going through topics you have studied. So I'll cover up some of them. So in the book, we have a contents page. So I came along and just took the book and went through the contents. And the idea of figuring out what you've learned and what you haven't learned is you can pretty much start at page 1 and start flicking through the book. Things that you've never heard of, you will have a pretty good idea of. We didn't study that. So in other words, for example, scales. We haven't studied scales. It won't seem familiar to you. Geometric solids. We may or may not have studied that. So this basically involves just flicking through the book and seeing which things we've studied. So we've studied all of this. When we go through the book, we'd say inclined lines, going in through figures. So now I can say, right, we studied triangles, we studied shapes, we studied plane figures, we studied angles, so 30, 60, 45 degrees. We have our angles here, we studied this, so using the protractor, perpendicular lines, and now I'm starting to get an idea of what did I study. And as I'm going through the book, all I was doing was just writing down some notes on what I studied. So for example, as we flicked through the book, I said, right, we studied angles. I know that we have an acute angle, 90-degree angle, obtuse angles. Then we studied plane figures, for example. So in other words, when I was going through the chapter on plane figures, which is here around page 29, we're talking about triangles. We talked about quadrilaterals, in other words, 4-sided figures. Then we've got hexagon and octagon, and as I keep skimming through it, we got into all the different ones, pentagons, hexagons, and so on and so forth. Next topic then we got onto was orthographic projection. That's dealing with elevation, plan, end view. And we just go through basically every topic in the book. And I'll start you off by highlighting the topic. So things that we have studied. I'll put a little red tick beside them. So we've studied inclined lines. That's lines at an angle. We've studied angles. We've studied triangles. We've studied quadrilaterals and polygons. So that's all what we call plane figures. So 2D figures. Orthographic projection. That's our elevation, plan, and end view. Pictorial drawing we've studied, but that's not really geometry. That's just how to sketch pretty much. Developments. So packaging, flattening out packaging. We've developed circles, so circles touching. We've drawn an ellipse. Transformation geometry, very important. We've done axial symmetry, central symmetry, and translations in there. So when we move things, we've studied the parabola. We've studied the ellipse and the parabola, so we did the two together. and we've studied rotation of objects. So that's where we said maybe a door rotating around a hinge, or maybe a sign swinging around a hinge. So rotation of objects as well. Those are all the main topics that we've studied. And like I said, you're basically just going to write down the heading. So you might write down the parabola, flick through the chapter on parabola, and you write down just a couple of notes like I have here of exactly what's in it. So I'll give you another one there. For example, developments is pretty much packaging flattened out, and I might write along with that we develop cones, box, and various different types of packaging, and you'll make the list. And that is the start of the research. So what you should have when you're finished is a full page here and just the heading dotted around. So you'll have the heading and just a load of bullet points to explain what's in the topic. A different heading over here, so it might be orthographic projection, and then you'll write down elevation plan, end view, and you make a full list. This page should be completely filled with the names of topics and little bullet points to explain what's in them. So that's your first steps. Get your topic picked and brainstorm your prior knowledge.